I'm starting over, D. Okay, number 30. All right, too many cosmic peace, particles in noon, science versus religion, war, time for your mind. All right, we just listened to the great Ken drop the whole thing on Moses and who was who and who wasn't what and what happened and all of that. And it's amazing because I remember how long I've been on the planet. And now we just really getting the evidence of the Moses thing. And when you find out it's been here on the planet for thousands of years, you have to acknowledge spirit beings exist. Because there's no way all of us exist in the millions in America, just in America, with all the technology and all that stuff. These people's able to keep this information from us distractively. And it should make you really take it serious that you've been following a fable mixed in with what happened about a person that was not part of your race, had no, well, he had dealings with Africans. We'll get into that later. But mostly it was a lie. And they used the magic, the Hyksos Jews used the magic of what happened with Akhmos and just turned everything in their favor. But the magic went out because what they doing in Israel, they getting a lot of backlash. You know, people is like, I know, I might not know the relationship between whatever you say in God and Israel, but I do know the difference between a justifiable murder and just genocide. And that's what people are seeing. They starting to wake up to that. So what we're doing is letting y'all know that that Almighty Nature already sent Afro with the information, the most pertinent information, which is the Bible, because the first page tells you that there's a spell upon the Ethiopian race worldwide, and that's from the Bible and the Caucasian. So the first thing we got to do is dismantle that. And the only way you can dismantle that is what we're doing. And go to the websites and stuff like that. That's in the, you can see under my name, newpanoon.com and fire9news.com, and get the books while you still can. Because they damn sure working on how to try to stop all that. So without further ado, let's get on with the get on, because I do got a little bit to add in. All right. It won't be too much, but maybe toward the end, y'all may hear some things you haven't heard before, but I'm just gonna do it just in case somebody don't see a new video and they run into mine or vice versa. Because you know, you never know what happens when you put this stuff out and go around the world, and you're amazed at who's seen what at certain time. All right, so let's continue with this, and please provide ancient Egyptian texts, traditions, artifacts, writings on the pyramids, cosmologies, etc., to support these statements. All right. Who was Moses by race and religion? Moses was Phoenician. The Phoenician were called Hebrew before the Jews adopted the terms. The Phoenicians were not original Egyptian, but a people who had supplanted the Ethiopians of Egypt in much the same way that the Jews and other Greeks and Romans supplanted the Phoenicians. The Phoenicians originally came from Asia and were invaders of Egypt themselves around 3000 BC. Moses was a ruler of Egypt, and his title, okay, remember that, title was Thothmose the First. He was beginning of the Moon Dynasty in Egypt around 1600 BC. Moses was an incarnation of the moon god Thoth, also called Stan and Hermes, and his magic wand was the caduceus. And Sinai was the mount that Moses was supposed to have visited so often, means Mount of Sin, that is the moon. That mount is the Great Pyramid at Giza, Egypt, meaning the biggest part, the biggest pyramid, because there's 3. All right. And it was the one that Khufu finished up. He didn't build them, he finished them up. These pyramids are way older than they telling people. All right, so the religion of Moses was pantheism. Moses came to power in Egypt during the time that the Jews who were ruling Lower Egypt started warring with the Egyptians who were ruling Upper Egypt. It will help the reader to understand better if he or she remembers that there were 2 Egypts, Upper and Lower, during the time of the latter-day pharaohs, the Phoenician pharaohs. A king could rule Upper Egypt while another ruled Lower Egypt. This was the case with the Jews and Egyptians. Since Moses was king of Egypt, why did the Jews take him as their divine leader and hero? After the Jews invaded Egypt around 2000 BC, they ruled Egypt closer to the Mediterranean for several hundred years. History called these invaders the Hyksos, but the Egyptians called them White Syrians. The title of their kings was Papi. And see this right here is plural. So when you do look into the history, there are a few Papis, pharaohs that the Jews had, meaning the serpent. All right. So once again, we talking about serpent, Set, and remember Leviathan, sex power, and all of that. This is how they got into power when they came in there under Khufu a long time. They started working their way up from the bottom. And once they got in there around the Phoenicians and the pharaohs, they used their women again, plus the magic and knowledge that they learned 3000 BC. And that's how they got in, and they start calling on the power of the brand new gods. They call it Heka. And Hu and Sia in the bottom half gods help them solidify magic. And that's why you have to build you a priesthood whenever anybody's building anything. If you don't think that this government don't have what they call the deep state, you don't think the deep state got their own priests and all that stuff, they do. You got to have a magical priesthood to go along. And that's what the CIA likes to play around with. The CIA and other little groups are definitely into the occult, mixing magic with mechanics and all that other stuff, psychiatry, all that stuff. All right? Because Papi, the king and pharaoh of the Jews, wanted the Egyptians to destroy a hippopotamus that kept bellowing in the night and thereby disturbing his rest. The Egyptian refused, for they believed that certain animals were incarnations of certain gods and that hippopotamus was one of their sacred animals. Bible Interpretation, Book 1. A war broke out between the Jews and Egyptians over this disagreement, and during this time, Moses came to power in Upper Egypt as THOTHMOSE the First. The Jews were getting military help from Asia. Therefore, THOTHMOSE realized that he could not win the war unless the Egyptians got foreign help too. As a result, Moses went to Ethiopia to solicit help, and the Ethiopians responded favorably. It was customary in those days to seal an agreement by taking a mate as a wife or concubine. Hence, it was written that Moses married an Ethiopian woman, and that was Thutmose married who that was, Nefertiti or Nefertari?
Nefertari.
Okay, Nefertari. It's crazy because that's one of my daughter's nicknames is Nefertari. I named her Nefertari. And this sealed the agreement between Egypt and Ethiopia. Moses' wife, it is written, was called Zipporah, Exodus 18, chapter 2, verse. So they're showing you how the Jews name swap actual things that happened, but they claimed it as theirs, all right? And then put magic on it, and that's why people believe this mess with no desire to see if it's true. Thutmose defeated Papi after a hard struggle, but instead of giving the Jews the treatment of aggressors, Thutmose chose to act as a protector for the Jews by treating them like brothers and allowing them to migrate back to Asia with the aid of the Egyptian army. Exodus 12, chapter 38, verse. So once again, Anu had already explained that with source materials. So all of our black so-called hieroglyphic metaneta readers and all that, stop saying that Bible is not true in the sense that it has the information in it. Y'all don't see it because you don't know how to see it. If you don't have this information we have, which was revealed by who y'all call the Neterat or the Netiru, rather, right? Or the 9 flags, the Brain News Nupu are the ones that brought this information and gave it to Afro. He gave it to the world. So we already know where to look. So once again, stop saying Moses is the story is made up. Stop with the mess. The stuff around it to an extent was made up. But we're going to get back into it one more time. All right, repetition is good. Moreover, he gave the Jews provision, supplied them with priests and teachers. Thutmose reacted that way because he was what? An incarnation of the moon god sin. That means that this god possessed him. Incarnation means that force was within the flesh and mind and blood of that being. So basically, he was not acting under his own will. This is why, like Manu said, had that happened to your father and brother died behind these people, why are you treating them like this? That's because the moon god had to make sure he was there personally, spiritually, personally, to make sure he didn't go over the number. The same way Ray Harakti had to be spiritually saturated. It had to be spiritually slowed down so he wouldn't go overboard, because the smack circle of order had to continue. All right. Egypt took over all of Western Asia after Thutmose defeated the Jews. For Egypt then became a warlike and conquering nation. This lasted past 1550 all the way to about 600, 500 BC. That was the peak of the power of the Phoenician Arabs from Kemet after they pushed their power all the way to Asia. And Ramesses, I know Thutmose III and the rest of them kept doing that. Even I think Ramesses III and them kept going. So they, after it hit about 600, 500-ish BC, they started waning to the point that they got weak enough for Alexander, the Greek, to come up in there after they joined the mystery schools and they let them in, let their guard down. It was supposed to happen. And they got fully uprooted up out of there. All right. The same way Akhmo showed the Hyksos Jews mercy and let them and got them out of there. In the reverse, they allowed Alexander to bring a whole military in there, like everything was cool. That's because the moon god spellbound them people and they didn't realize what was going to happen to them. All right. Foregoing answer is the base of the Jews' divine exodus from Egypt. Therefore, the Egyptians did not oppress the Jews in Egypt. Here we go again. Look, St. John 8, chapter 33. It was the Jews oppressing the Egyptians. If you read John 8, chapter 38, it's a conversation that the Jews was having with Jesus, right? And I'm gonna read what it says. It says, I don't know if, let me see, it's gonna show up. Not gonna show up. I'll just read it from my phone real quick. John 8, chapter 33. John chapter 8, verse 33. And it says, in this verse, the Bible, where the people Jesus was speaking to responded, "We are Abraham's descendants and have never been enslaved to anyone. How can you say that we shall be made free?" So at this quote here, this is a confession. You know, at that time, they were not. They were the ones who invaded Kemet and enslaved people. All right, so that means that Jesus was incorrect when he was talking to them. All right. The race and religion of Jesus, of Moses, was a Phoenician's connection to Egypt. Moses portrayed as a Phoenician rather than a native Egyptian. The Phoenicians linked with the ancient Canaanites, which are the same people, okay, were regarded as invaders in Egypt, much like how the Jews later displaced the Phoenicians in their own time. The BIA stretches that Moses himself was not of Egyptian descent, but was from the ruling Phoenician case in Egypt. All right, so when he say of Egyptian descent, they mean in this point Ethiopian or African. All right, the Phoenician cast in Egypt was like Thutmose, a pharaoh from the 18th dynasty. The Phoenician invasion, the Phoenicians identified as the early invaders of Egypt, replacing Ethiopians who were historically tied to Nubia and African civilizations of Egypt. This invasion occurred around 3000 BC, and they ruled northern part of Egypt, often identified as the Hyksos period, roughly 1600 BC. During this period, the Jews ruled Lower Egypt while the native Egyptians controlled Upper Egypt. So it's just giving you a summary. All right, so we know that Moses Thutmose asserts that the BIA asserts that Moses was Thutmose the first, and incarnation of the moon god, thoughts also associated with Sin and Senna and Hermes, later Greek tradition, the moon god key attributed to wisdom. So another thing too, when you have a lot of these religious people keep talking about, you know, we're sinners and all y'all doing, they're carrying on people who follow the moon god. And that's what Christianity and Judaism and Islam is. That they all use the term sin, and they are sinners, meaning they're modern day moon followers. So that's what sin is, even though they try to attribute sin into some innate wrong that you can't get rid of, that's not the actual truth. They're still carrying on the God, the moon god name and the ancient name of the moon. It's called sin. All right, Thoth is the patron deity of wisdom, Egyptian mythology. Thoth was known as the god of wisdom, writing, and magic. This is why they keep talking about in the beginning was the word, and the word was God. The God that they're talking about is moon god, because the moon god is known for writing, and that's why you can't have a word in religious terms without reading it, because there's no such thing as words being spoken in the beginning when it was no body, it's no mouth, it was nothing in the beginning. It was nothing for add, all that stuff came way much later. So this is what they're saying. All right, so you got Moses associated with wisdom, laws, teaching, rituals, links him directly to thoughts. All right, this is how this all connects. So we're going to jump down through that. Got the Mount Sinai, the Great Pyramid, the narrative of Moses receiving the 10 Commandments at Mount Sinai is, according to the Bible interpretation and explanation, it's a metaphorical reference to the Great Pyramid of Giza. And Ralph Ellis did a great job when he broke down Giza and the pyramids and the mathematical equation and why pi and 40 is used throughout the book. It's very, very interesting. All right, so we got Moses, pantheism, and Egyptian politics again. Even the Bible tells you that Moses was learned in all the wisdom of Egypt. So that means also the religion. That's why when you watch the movies or the cartoons, especially the Prince of Egypt, you'll see Horus and Set and Osiris, and they just show it to you in a song, but they don't dare tell you what their belief system was, because then you would realize that Islam, Christianity, Judaism have that same stuff, which you've been showing y'all. All right, so you got more Moses' war with the Jews and the Exodus. So we got the conflict with Poppy, explained that Poppy, the Jewish king of Lower Egypt, had a peculiar dispute with the native Egyptians over a hippopotamus, which was sacred to the Egyptians. Poppy's request to have the hippopotamus destroyed is rejected, and this leads to a war between the Jews and Hyksos, right? Which Anup went into, which I'm gonna go into again. All right, so these are some of the sources they pulled up that I think Anup didn't mention. All right, Egyptian sources support Moses' role. Here are some of the Egyptian texts and references that support the statements. The Papyrus Harris, 1 circa 200 BC, details the Hyksos' Jewish role in Egypt and their eventual expulsion. Like Anup said, a lot of this stuff was written down after the fact. All right, even though this is 1200, this happened 300 some years prior to this. Though it doesn't mention Moses by name, it discusses the foreign domination of Egypt and their ultimate defeat. 2, the tale of two brothers, an Egyptian text where a god of the moon is called upon, which much like how Moses depicted in the Bible. The gods speak directly to Pharaoh, hinting at the role of divine intervention in Egyptian politics. This is the same thing as God speaking to Moses on the top of the mountain, right? Which we know is the pyramids. The Great Pyramid and the Moon. The Great Pyramid's alignment with Orion, celestial counterpart to look Osiris. The moon god hints at a connection between the pyramid and the lunar cycle. Also, remember Moses went up to see God in the pyramid for a few days. He was gone. And then in absence, they say his brother Aaron had all the people melt down their gold and build a cow, which is what? Hathor. It's still Egyptian information. And then when he said Moses came down, he got mad and killed everybody. So this is the same thing. When Moses, Thutmose got upset with what was going on with the Hyksos, he killed them. This is what the presence of Osiris. All this stuff is just showing you the links, all right? Even though it's clearly the moon god and Osiris work together though, and no one explains that. All right, the final thoughts of Moses' role. Moses was the Phoenesian incarnation of the moon god. Thought we got all that. We got Egypt in the struggle, and that stuff turned into the Exodus narrative, all right, which is not a tale of oppression, but a symbolic return to its place of origin. All right, so now we're going to go down here. I just asked it, what does the Papyrus Harris actually say about the Hyksos Jews being expelled from Kemet? So it just gave me the same kind of rundown, all right, that it gave me earlier. And sometimes I hate when it does that. All right. Then it talks about Ramesses III had a struggle with the foreign invaders and the sea people, who were likely a coalition with tribes from the Aegean and Eastern Mediterranean region, whom could have been descendants of or linked to the Hyksos. So we don't need to know all of that because Ramesses III came way after. And they even lie and say that Moses in the movie, The Prince of Egypt, and other movies, they'll say that Ramesses is the pharaoh and Moses was the prophet, which is a lie. Moses is Thutmose, which is Akhmos. Ramesses is a descendant. But this is how they did. They took two pharaohs and made Ramesses, who came later in the 18th dynasty, and put him as the pharaoh in the place of Thutmose or Akhmos and made him Moses the prophet. This is how sick Disney World is, as well as the religious people who knew this was a historical lie. Okay? So we're going to jump down. We went through all this and stuff and talk about the military and how they was kicked out. All right, so we're going to keep going. The summary, we got all of that. So actually, I want a chart. I said, thank you. According to Amenubi Rakapata Unu, Thutmose first, whose Egyptian name is Thutmose, the first Egyptian name is Digi-Houtemes, which means born of the god Thoth. He was also known by his throne name, Akhep-Per-Kare, meaning great is the manifestation of the Ka, or spirit of Ra. Let me be clear. So y'all can see that this is a transition from the sun to the moon. All right, because I think Akhenaten, his name was at that in the beginning. They all, but eventually it turned into moon names. Let me be clear, so as not to appear to think Abanubi Rakata Afro Unu was confused. Nupu myself were also thrown off trying to tie down who was the pharaoh being referred to. After doing research between the both of us, we were thrown off by the title Amenubi Ra'akapata Afro Unu used, Thutmose. A Newt noticed Digi-Houtemes was called Thutmoses, not Thutmose. So a Newt reasoned it out. It was Akhmos the first, Kamos, plus the fact Akhmos I was beginning of the 18th dynasty, moon named pharaohs. And Kemet, like Amenubi Ra'akapata had stated, the war over the hippopotamus can be found in the story of Apophis versus Kenenre in the 17th century BC. All right. So we ain't got to go through all of that because the Newt already went through the hippopotamus. So I'm going to skip that and we'll go down a little bit more, a little bit more. Okay, so we keep going, get past that. The call of Apophis and Sekenre. We're gonna go past the store because I noticed something down in the store that I thought was interesting earlier. All right, so the kicker was that Thebes and Avaris were more than 700 miles away. So we know that that was a setup, like Anoop said. It was setting Sekenre up to run through and try to start the war. And how he started it, it's like you said, it's religious. Just like you can start a religious war around the world. If you go over to Saudi Arabia and insult Allah, or you insult the Prophet Muhammad, it's going to be some problems. You understand? Or anywhere in the world, you go over Asia and insult Buddha or whatever. That's what he did. He knew that they was highly spiritual, and they took that personal, and that's how he was able to set Sekenenre up to be killed. All right, which is low down and dirty. All right, so we're gonna keep going down. And we're gonna get into when Kamos come in. All right. So it said historically, we do not know that Sekenenre eventually went to war, perhaps against the Hyksos, and likely died in battle. In fact, his mummy contains 5 different head wounds, which may have been inflicted by the axes of his enemies. After Sekenenre's death, a man named Kakmos, either his brother or son, took up his royal mantle. Kakmos erected a fascinating stele at the temple site of Karnak and used it to describe his efforts to reunify Egypt, war, propaganda, and death. His officials tried to mollify Kakmos' warlike spirit, but it didn't work. In a propagandistic effort to boost his martial reputation, Kakmos detailed how he reportedly destroyed Hyksos cities and pushed farther south to conquer parts of Nubia, he boasted. A virus on the 2 rivers, I laid it waste without inhabitants. I destroyed their towns and burned their homes to red and ruin heats forever because of the destruction they had wrought in the midst of Egypt. They who had allowed themselves to hearken to the call of the Asiatics had forsaken Egypt, their mistress. Kamos' second stele, which records his victory against the Hyksos in the Luxor Museum, the Kuhuraito CCBYSA 4.0, says Kamos seemingly died during the conflict before he could solidify his conquest, a few of which slipped from Theban hands. Thankfully for him, his nephew or younger brother Akhmos, son of Sekenenre Ta'o, ascended the throne. He consolidated power, retook some of the lands Kamos took and then lost, and ousted the last of the Hyksos, fulfilling his father's vision, hippos or no hippos. All right, the chat said, yes, you tied together several deep threads of the Hyksos wars, the Hippopotamus quarrel, and the dynastic transition that give rise to Thutmose the First and the 18th dynasty. Let me structure this clear. So all they're going to do is give you a couple of things which is interesting. Here he said the name confusion. Thutmose versus Akhmos. Egyptian kings often carried theophoric names, meaning with a god in them. Thutmose, Djehutimes, equals born of Thoth, moon, Hermes connection, as you notice. Akhmos, Iames, meaning moon born, equals contains the hieroglyph for La, the moon deity. Both names are moon names, so when Amenubi says the Moon Dynasty begins, it's not accidental. Akhmos the First was literally moon born. Thutmose the First carried the Thoth moon Hermes in his name. That's why there was confusion. Both lines converge in lunar rulership after the Hyksos expulsion. All right, the Hippopotamus quarrel, Tau, Sekenenre Tau versus Apophis and Pepi, preserved in the quarrel of Apophis and Sekenenre, a tale written down later in the 19th dynasty. All right, I don't think you mentioned that one, Anoop, right? I don't think the chat mentioned a text called the Call of Apophis and Sekenenre, correct? You hear me, Anoop? Can see her speak back in a minute. All right, I'm gonna keep going. Symbolism: hippopotamus equals Sethian, chaotic power, sacred but dangerous. Apophis, a set worshiper, paradoxically demands they be silent, showing his hypocrisy and lack of divine legitimacy. For Egyptians, the tale become a satire. The foreign Hyksos king was illegitimate, blind to cosmic order. And so that's another thing too. So most likely Apophis knew they was laughing at him because they didn't come from the ancient line. They wasn't in Kemet long enough, right? And so they knew that he didn't understand the importance of the hippopotamus, because if he did, he wouldn't have said they need to be killed, because the hippopotamus represent not just a goddess, but the hippopotamus represent balance, because the hippopotamus not only can exist in water, which water was special to the ancient ancestors, which is represent the waters of Noon, right? And then the hippopotamus came out of the water onto land. So that was special to them. And the fact that Apophis is like, man, y'all need to kill them animals or it's going to be problems. So that's pretty much disrespecting one of the gods. That's what he did. He wanted to set them up to do that. All right, so we went through this. Thutmose the first, the son of Sekenenre, founder of the 18th dynasty, final defeat of the Hyksos. So all we're doing is showing y'all how the Israel today, or the Jews, have been a problem since 3000 BC. All right. Let me see.
Since the line of Jacob.
They've been doing the same mess. All right. And they know the moon god them is backing them up, because America is the moon base. And Tahuti runs America. So Tahuti is still causing them to be able to continue doing what they're doing. Modern times, all right? So we went through the foreign lands. We call it the Asiatics. They call them Amu. So for those who want to do more research, you want to find the Jews, all you got to do is look through, like they say, look in Thutmose's victory inscriptions. The Kamo Stele described the Hyksos as Asiatics, Amu, rulers at Avaris. So you can see that the Jews or Israel is not in a right place, and that they've been doing this whole switching their names for a long time and lying to their own people. So you got folks on the side, especially you got the Jews getting hit and being bothered and hated around the world because they don't want to acknowledge the truth. That's why over there, when you deal with genetics and stuff, you got to get a special court order from the judicial system to get a blood test, because they really don't like you getting blood tests, because it's going to show that they're not from that area. Only in special circumstances will a court allow DNA testing over there. All right, they're not native to that land, none at all. All right, so to reconcile your point, Amenubi Rakapata wasn't confused. He was deliberately connecting Moses with the Moon Dynasty pharaohs, Thutmose first through Thutmose the first. All right, hippopotamus coil is an allegory for Egyptian resistance to Hyksos rule. The Hyksos portion of Thutmose is the historical core behind both the Exodus story and the claim that Moses equals Moon Thoth incarnation. All right, so then I said, it's fine. I would like to add to your statement that Hyksos expulsion under Thutmose the first is the historical core behind both the Exodus story and the claim that Moses equals Moon Thoth incarnation, end quote. Thutmose the first did escort and besiege the Heka Hassut Hyksos Jews back to Canaan, Palestine, later renamed by the Romans, and some of them stopped in Canaan while the rest were sent back to Asia. That is where the East Indian lineage came from. This is why the name Asian is in the name Caucasian. Here's the evidence. AI overview. After being expelled by Thutmose I, the Hyksos fled to Shahran in Palestine, a city near Gaza, where they settled after leaving Egypt. Thutmose I pursued them, besieging Shahran for 6 years until they were definitely driven out. Their fate after this defeat remains uncertain, with historical records falling silent. All right. After ending the Hyksos 108-year rule over Egypt, THOTHMOSE the First and his forces besieged the Hyksos capital of Avaris before pursuing them to Palestine. And I think after that, later on, Akhenaten ended up over there in Avaris and built the Amarna spot for his followers. All right. And the Hyksos was around in his time too. All right. The final defeat at Sharuhin drove the Hyksos out of the region. Manetho's account. The ancient Egyptian historian Manetho wrote that the Hyksos were exiled to Southwest Asia, which some historians suggested might have influenced the biblical story of the Exodus, integration, and enduring legacy forced labor. This the place Hyksos likely entered into various forms of labor and construction under the new Egyptian rulers, similar to conditions described in the biblical Exodus narrative. Except when they said that they was building stuff without straw, that was not under THOTHMOSE and them. That was under, they actually took Akhenaten's story and how Akhenaten was making his people who followed him build Amarna with no shade and just straw and bricks and something else. So that had nothing to do with the Hyksos. The Hyksos stole that part of what really happened and added that into what happened when they got kicked out of Kemet in 1550 BCE. All right, which is like maybe 200 years before Akhenaten was even born. All right. So all this is dealing with the expulsion of the Hyksos and the associated events provided inspiration for the later biblical account of the Israelites' descent into Exodus from Egypt, according to scholars. Just wanted to remind people that the Exodus story was an eviction, expulsion of Caucasian Jews who used to be Hebrews by adopting Kemet and Phoenician influence in 3000 BC upon entering Kemet under African rule, then 2000 BC under Phoenician Arab rule forward. Then switching their names from Yaakov, Jacob, then Israel, then Israelites, Semites, etc., all coded to hide their true origin. As a matter of fact, Israel is, so I'm going to skip past all of that, right? I went through that, jumped past all of that. And I think I got down here. Okay, cool. So that's the end of that right there. So I wanted to end this with a little something different. All right. Anything you want to say before I move into the next one?
No, not at the moment.
All right. Hold on for a second. All right, I'm finna share my screen. All right, we're gonna jump onto this real quick. All right, so this is getting at York, because they keep, again, we know York did not write the Bible interpretation explanation. All right, but they kept saying he did. So I did this in 2015. I said this spoke the response to Bakari Tanu Amun, who said Moses was titled THOTHMOSE I, but there was never a Moses. This is laughable because Moses came from the very real Phoenician pharaoh called THOTHMOSE I. Moses could not have existed if THOTHMOSE I had not existed, because Moses' story is a remix of THOTHMOSE I life. We have covered how Tahuti thought that the creator of all three major religions called Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The Bible interpretation explanation, remember Amanu Rakti or Rahakata, aka Afro Unu, Sipa Nupa and Jeepa Nupa, contradicting York's lies about where the laws of THOTHMOSE came from, and with whom York claims that THOTHMOSE I got his laws from Tahuti, who was Egyptian. Now, before Tahuti gets THOTHMOSE the laws, he said the people that was leaving with THOTHMOSE I, which never happened, had to be Egyptian. This means they had to be African. But how did Tahuti overlook that THOTHMOSE was an African Egyptian himself? This also posed another problem for York, because he thought that both men were real. All right, so when you look at this is the religious version. Do you understand that? This is what the Sabians master teacher was telling us. So we already them showed through hieroglyphs and all of that there is no such thing as the religious version of Moses. And this picture is fake too. All right. So now you go over here out of the Egypt and the Pharaohs. He said, "This is Moses." How? And then the pictures don't even look alike. It'd be different if he said, "Okay, this is this Israelite version." But you can tell these is not the same people.
Exactly.
And see, this is what I'm saying. And what they're trying to say, oh, you know, that was a school we was going through. That was a lying thing. Ain't no damn school. It was a lie.
Yeah, they kept saying that. I'm like, what?
There's no such thing. And watch, I'm finna show them how they can't get out of this one. I'm gonna bust them up with this one because you ain't finna run this time. Now, if you go into the same book, Ancient Egypt and the Pharaohs, this is who you're called Kamos right here. This is the real Moses right here. The picture ain't accurate, but the name is. Look, Pharaoh Kamos undertook the liberation of Egypt, which had been occupied for over a century by what? The Hyksos. See? Hotep and Seqenenre's wife had given him two sons, Kamos and Akhmos. He talking about the man parents. His eldest son Kamos made the greatest impression of the kingdom records. The kingdom records of his reign are recorded on wooden tablets. The Pharaoh summoned his council and explained the situation to them. So here, York is telling you he's reading from the real story. Mm-hmm. But he's telling you the other two guys that are not are the real one. Kamos is Moses, not THOTHMOSE, and not the religious one either. Mm-hmm. So how can they even begin to make sense of this? This shows you that the man was a copy and paster, and he was fake the whole time. And all he did was use the spell of religion because that's what Tahuti's sign signature was. And that's why we stuck here looking crazy right now. I'm just trying to find a clear thing because I want to read what it says because I don't think it's going to blow up all the way. Just give me a second, but I got the book right here. I got the book right here. Hold on. Okay, Menes, Zosa. And that's the sad part is that they use people like him to keep people further back behind the times. And all Tahuti and them was doing was buying the Caucasian them time to try to complete the New World Order any way they could. And this is why when you look at all the information that these people put out, nothing got done. All right, so it said, he said he had the Pharaoh summoned his council and explained the situation to them. It was far from hopeful. I know what my courage is for. There's a Pharaoh at Avaris, and there's another at Cush. I'm sitting like a hyphen between an Arab and a Nubian. All right, I think this is okay. And those who dwell in the black land share their possession with me. I cannot make him cross at Memphis, the water of Egypt. Now he is in possession of Kamunu, Hermopolis. There is no one left who is not overwhelmed by the taxes of the Asiatics. I am going to meet him to cleave his belly. It is my heart to deliver Egypt and strike the Arabs. The counselors believed that there should be no action. There was no lack of anything. However, Pharaoh Kamos acclaimed himself as liberator of Egypt, and so Kamos went with his army with no resistance until it reached Middle Egypt. Pharaoh Kamos celebrated his victory with 2 steles that are written in the same way, and they may have been set up beside each other in the temple of Karnak. The second stele is intact. Kamos saw himself as the master of Vars. There has been rumors of there being 2 Kamos. Kamos spent the last years of his life preparing his tomb like his ancestors. The pharaohs of the 17th dynasty toward the middle of the last century, some of them, Cadiz workmen looked for gold, discovered the burial place of Ahotep, wife of Sekenenre, the brave, the mother of Kamos's dynasty ended in 1580. So again, Kamos is the real Moses. Now Thutmose the first, or Thutmoses, nor was it the religious Moses. All right, so that is my spiel, and I just wanted to bring that in. Like I said, every chance we get, I'm going to brush them up because they are part of the spell that they claim they're trying to break, and they only casting spells on each other. All right, so anything you want to say before we get out of here?
No.
All right, 2 minute call to peace and 1 time.